Well, welcome to a sunny day in Wiltshire, and we're now doing the edits for the very first Basis Project conference, which occurred on April the 27th in Honey Street at the Barge Inn, and we were very privileged to be the first people to use the first section of their brand new handmade green oak barn. Tony Topping was our opening presenter, and he presented a brilliant lecture on the Bock Saga. Now, this is a very detailed lecture. He's done a tremendous job on this. He initially didn't want us to record it, but he then allowed me to record it, and Matthew Williams was there on camera, and myself running around in the background organising and talking to various people. And we're very honoured to be able to present this very detailed, very important lecture, which has got connections to higher consciousness. In many respects, perhaps what I've been discussing or talking about, the intelligence transfer sequence, the thing that we had in the pirate radio consciousness awareness thing, which happened in Ireland in the 1970s, of course, and of course Radio Caroline with Loving Awareness. He discusses it with a great passion. Out of respect for his detail and also his great work on this, we're not going to do what we normally do, and that is include the very detailed pictures of his PowerPoint. Tony's done so much work on this that really it's best that we just use this as an indication of the depth of knowledge that he has on this saga, this origins to what was used possibly for the Lord of the Rings series of books. That's what J.R. Tolkien was actually referring to, the rings involved with this. And of course the new work by Nassim Haramein on toroids and rings. There's a whole science to this. And Tony delivered his presentation, and thanks to Tony, this is the Bock Saga on the Basis Project lecture series at the Barge Inn, April 27th. Right, rather than put my presentation up and screw everything up, we're just going to announce this is the very first Basis Project meetup. In the very first time this room has been used ever. This whole building has been constructed after a lot of money with the, maybe it shouldn't be in the shot, with a great deal of funding and stuff. So this whole Barge Inn has got a tremendous history over many hundreds of years, and this is the start from this wall onwards, whole new adventure. So we're greatly privileged that the owners of the barge have let us use this room for the very first time. We only had electricity wired in on Friday, so we're very happy to be here. It's comfortable for us all here today. And we welcome, after 20 years of starting the Basis Project with a guy called Barry King. I have his announcement. We'll do it when we're closing at the end of the day. 20 years ago, Barry King came along and said that the government is making aliens or programmable generated life forms, which these things are on these pull-ups. These are generated, genetically manufactured creatures which are a bit like greys, and allegedly are made in a base under the village of Peasmore in Berkshire, not too far away from here. Now, this story has evolved over 20 years, and there's lots of other players in this character, this amazing game. The second person who came along on this track was a guy called James Casbolt. And he actually watched an incredibly brilliantly made VHS documentary called Bases by me on VHS. And so I don't know whether it was my supreme brilliance and Matthew Williams' astute interrogation of Barry King, because we really didn't believe a word that Barry said. It's all just, you really must be joking. But this is at a time when the Dulce papers had just been released in the United States, and also the X-Files started to come along. So this is a really premier leading edge knowledge type of information that the British government would be making Nazi greys in a base in England. So this involves the Nazi secret alien underground bases, Nazi technologies in World War II, the stuff that General Patton got across and had to be bumped off over. There's a whole raft of stuff in this. And I've been covering this, we're now up to bases 36 or 37. There are people in this room who are direct experiencers, who've had direct encounters, knowledge, and dealt with these programs in one way or another. The people who are speaking today are experiencers. They're people who've actually encountered, dealt with, or suffered from the abuse of this sort of technology. So we have to take our hat off to these guys. This is the very first little sample of the BASIS project in the public domain. We have a major conference in Marlborough College on the 8th, 9th and 10th of August, which is where we're going to have the big venue and the big school, Marlborough College. So the other thing that's come up in the BASIS thing is the black goo, a consciousness, some kind of intelligent substance from the earth itself. And this is related to the topic that Tony's going to talk about.
It is. It's related, I would say, to what you've probably experienced if you've gone through paranormal experiences. It really shows what goes on.
Yeah.
It's a very ancient thing we're going to be looking at. Yeah.
The bottom line is assume nothing. Just pay attention, and maybe at some point we'll be able to make sense of this. The other major thing is today that we've got Channel 4 here today in the guise of Plum Productions. Plum Pictures. God almighty. So they're going to be shooting. Now, if you do not want to be on that documentary, now we don't know what the documentary really is. It's maybe factual or entertainment, poking fun at silly people. No? He believes in aliens. This is a serious thing. Very serious. I poke a bit of fun at this because it really is bloody awful, really.
Yeah.
We have Jane from the Royal Navy. Is this right?
Sit on the floor.
We've got a seat here for you, Jane, if you want. There's 3 seats left here.
Is that?
Yeah.
I know how to break something up.
Okay. Now we do have academics here today. So this is really an academic process. The BASIS project is about getting data, not making too many conclusions, but getting that data for analysis. Okay, we'll then commence the very first BASIS project mini conference with Tony Topping.
Thank you very much, Mr. Miles, sir.
Yeah.
I don't know. Am I in the right spot there, Matthew? Hi, hello everyone. My name's Tony Topping, and I'm often in the media. I'm sure you've seen me. I contribute quite a lot to various projects, etc., etc. Just briefly, if anyone's interested, organisers do ask me to just plug this little thing, which is the remote viewing workshop. What we do. So, if anybody's interested, maybe approach Miles. We can maybe arrange an event there. But what it's about the Russian techniques and the American techniques. And the reason why the Russian technique is so significant, it's something called new cosmology, which you wouldn't have heard of in the West, is because the Russian KGB during the height of the Cold War went absent without leave and developed a system of understanding cosmology via higher ordered consciousness, which is what this lecture is all about. And what this story I'm going to tell you is all about as well is the way higher ordered consciousness and the way we develop as human beings has forces around it that will also come after you. And this is partly my story, and it's partly the story of a man called Aser Bock, who was part of the Bock family. And so we'll go through all that. But first, let me tell you about me first of all, and how I got involved in all this. He says, with confidence. Will it do it? Oh my days. Give it a good push. Page down, page up. Here all day. There we go. What we've got here is a UFO that came over my house in 1999. I've had paranormal experiences since childhood, but it is this actual object that started during those years on the 17th of the 5th, 1999, that started the most dreadful forms of covert harassment from the intelligence services. I know what it is, and they know what it is. The thing with me is that the people who are monitoring me, and still are monitoring me, knew what was going on here before I did. And the more astute people at conferences will often ask me the question, how the hell did they know? And that's always a constant battle. But what we'll see here is the UFO flying in over my house. What it does is it flies in over the house, There we go, that's it. Sorry about that. I don't know what's happened there. We've got a technical problem there for some reason. Let's just hold on. Yeah, it's playing. Go back and go forward. Play. It's not playing it to the projector. I'm sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. I'll just explain what happened. Basically, what happens is this UFO comes in over my house. It's on YouTube. You can see it on YouTube. And basically, it comes in over. It flies in. And it illuminates a TV antenna, and then it moves around, and then it comes back out again. Dr. Chris French said on This Morning that it was an aeroplane, but if it was an aeroplane, it would have reverse gears. Not only that, it moves behind a tree, and it comes back out again. So the pilot is well aware that she cannot see me. She actually cannot see me. The pilot's well aware of that, and so she backs out, and backs back in again, backs out again. It's got reverse gears. It's not on any form of flight path, and then it swings back round, and it illuminates a TV antenna twice, because it knows, whatever it is we're looking at, actually knows that it's going to be on telly. And sure enough, it was on TV, it was all across various broadcasters. The thing about it is, however, there was more to it than that. It was signalling to somebody. And so it commenced for me some very serious harassment when I had this UFO coming over my house. It went for image analysis. The conclusion of the image analysis was that it was indeed a UFO that managed to fly in an unusual flight pattern and could do all kinds of things and fly sideways and backwards, similar to a helicopter but not quite. It did not give any civil aviation authority coding. The civil aviation sequence of an aircraft flying at night is, I think, something like red, green, white or whatever. It didn't give any of that at all. It's a genuine UFO. It's a genuine interaction that is going on that triggered interest from covert interests. Covert interests are, of course, what I often talk about, my harassment. And what happened is I was subjected to what only could be called, and it is on the internet under an article called My Stand Against Classified Mind Control Operations. You have people like Edward Snowden explaining in the media about electronic surveillance, the surveillance of email and the internet. What he hasn't told you, and he probably didn't know, is the fact that you are also, and I'm sure you will agree with me, some of you here, subjected to electronic mind-invasive harassment, which is a covert form of technology that they don't want broadcasting in the public domain. This is the man, for a period of 5 years, who stalked me because of interaction with this strange object, bizarre as it may seem. This included leaving answering machine messages on my mobile phone indicating where I'd just left. So if I'd walked out of my local Tesco's, he'd be leaving an answering machine message telling me where I'd just come out of. 1001 things went on with him. To say that the invasiveness of this technology was absolutely frightening. And in one particular incident, he went into a local pub, did this man, and he followed me into the pub with a female. There are two pillars there, as you can see, and he propped himself up there with his arms folded. A very arrogant man. After all these years, I've awoken and I'm after this man, because I don't know who he is. But he's out there. He's used this technology without oversight, and that is very worrying, that there are people who are covertly harassing experiencers, or even ordinary members of the public, without any form of oversight. What is worrying is when I walked past him, he indicated to me what he was doing to me. Only he would know that, and only I would know that. It's similar to walking past someone here, and he'll go, "We're giving you harassing phone calls," as you walk past him. Similar, that's not quite what he said, but it's a similar thing. Later on, the woman in question turned round to him and said, "Why isn't Tony communicating with us?" And this all happened in 1999. Now, it's 2014, I'm 14 years down the line, kind of roughly. I'm a lifetime, actually, down the line. And I've discovered now, I don't know it all, I've seen it all, I've discovered roughly what's going on. And it's this story then we're going to go into is about higher ordered consciousness and the way it finds itself like water into all of us, which is our natural birthright. The visiting off-world intelligences know this. A lot of trouble by the darker elements of secret societies, etc., etc., is gone to, as we will see in this story, to persecute individuals who may understand that we have higher ordered consciousness as a natural birthright. And that's what the story's about. My story is a separate lecture altogether. It's not about me. It's about a man called Aser Bock. Aser Bock he is called, who was born in Norway, and that's what our story is all about. And also, we will discover that when I start this story, which is called the Bock Saga, we discover that it compels women. We don't know why, but it has a very compelling nature on the audience because it's about the One Ring. It's about the true ring behind the Lord of the Rings, we have reason to believe. And what will happen, it involves the sacred feminine. It's called the core. It's called the root, and it's called the root for a very deliberate reason. And it's also called the saga, which is a very deliberate name as well. Everything is done for a reason. It's about the movement of higher ordered intelligence upon a society that is no longer with us. This is our story, the Bock Saga. And what happened is my friend's wife, who is not into any of this, was listening to me very intently when I said that the word Bock Saga relates to Boxing Day. Some of the language, which is an ancient Norse extinct language, is still in the English language. And what you will see is you will see this Boxing Day means that during those time, in a time called Paradise Time, which we will explain later, where the sacred feminine was regarded and revered, this is what happened. Now what happens is when I tell this story, therefore, the females in the room seem strangely compelled because there's like this collective ancient connection to what we're talking about and the sacred feminine. We still know it to this day, and it's fascinating to watch. Let us go into it then about what we're going to talk about this evening. We've got one ring. That's what it's called, one ring. As we can see in the Lord of the Rings and the one ring to rule them, one ring to find them all, and I personally say in the light bind them. We're going to explore what this ring truly is and what Tolkien was actually talking about when he was talking about the ring. Of course, the famous inventor, Arthur Bell, inventor of the Bell helicopter, appreciated that the structure of the ring was the self in a toroidal universe that can be both separate and connected with everything else. He understood that fully. All great scholars through history and all the Norse mythologists, even down to the 15th century, understood what this was all about and understood that the Bock Saga was actually missing from our history. What is the Bock Saga? Well, the Bock Saga is a saga. It means a story. It means sa, to receive, and it means gar, to give. The philosophy of the saga of the One Ring that seeks us all is one must first receive before being able to give. Hence the word saga. It's missing from the history books, and we've made some interesting discoveries about that. In the fact of the matter is, there are volumes missing from it as well. There are approximately 5 ancient volumes missing, even before Norse mythology is actually understood by scholars, it would appear. It centres around Scandinavia, and it centres around the man called Aser Bock. Of course, before the Bock Saga and the One Ring is responsible for something called root, which we'll go into later. And before we begin this, I'd just like to say, researchers in the room, please feel free to take notes, but you will discover that there was also something before the root was developed. There was something called the esoteric language of the birds. Bizarre as it may seem in the world of the esoteric, to understand that the language of the birds is to understand the highest wisdom. The birds had other significance as well. It brought a human soul at the moment of birth, and it took it away at the moment of death. And there are many reports on the internet of people, just as they're falling asleep and they hear the birds tweeting, and it sounds absolutely crazy, suddenly they're hearing consciousness, suddenly they're hearing something different. The esoteric language of the birds was the language of the ancient kings. It's worth taking a look at just before we begin. Is everybody okay? Are we going at a good pace? Anybody have any quick questions at all? No, okay. I think there is an established view, as we can see, that the challenge is constantly in conflict with established beliefs that are past, present and future. For us experiencers, and those here at this conference who probably have had these paranormal experiences, there's something a bit more deeper than that. In fact, the American government discovered it in 1950, and the Russians did as well, as a military kind of research thing. They actually discovered that there is indeed the suppression of a higher ordered consciousness going on, which is our birthright to have. The established structures of the academic hierarchy, of course, involve all aspects of humanity, and there is an esoteric cover-up going on. There is indeed. For example, I could go on television and have the piss ripped out of me by the presenter. Any presenter that could be. So he rips the piss out of me for having my experiences. But yet he's gone down the lodge, and there's nothing wrong with that. They are free to worship. But my point is this. The media take the piss out of us. No disrespect to the people present, but they take the piss out of us as experiencers, but yet the very people that are doing that in some cases are Freemasons, they are involved in the occult secret societies, they are fully aware of what we are talking about, but they're not going to tell you that. That I find hypocritical, frankly, as I'm sure you will agree. We know also that there was a past civilization that was highly evolved. Later on I'm going to show you something quite mind-blowing that involves the United Kingdom in all this. It quite blew my mind when I read it. I was put onto it by the crowd at Glastonbury who are very switched on to all this. And we found evidence, of course, across the globe of a highly evolved human species from before the Ice Age. And I think it's true to say that we do, and I'm sure you will all agree with me, demand a scientific recognition of our past that depicts society's advanced technology and culture. Because, my God, the story we're going to show you, the Bock Saga, depicts something mind-blowing, I think. I'm sure you will agree when at the end of the talk, of just how mind-blowing the story you're about to hear is, really. Of course, they were seers. They were ancient seers. You could call them remote viewers. You could even call them experiencers. They understood, they knew. They developed arks. They developed Noah's Ark. It's very true what happened there. The Bock Saga indicates that there are some important factors that led up to this great flood and the building of arks. They actually could see this coming. They could see it coming before it happened. What technology they used, we're not sure, but it could indeed be psychic functioning, higher paranormal functioning, but they knew that it was coming and they gave it a special name which I'll go into later. It's an ancient name that nobody really knows. It's not in mainstream mythology. It's not present. It's missing. What you're looking at is missing from our history books. The legend goes back, the Bock Saga, the legend goes back before recorded history to the old North Pole. It is there in the land of Odinmar, what we know as Ringland, which is now known as Helsinki, that a sacred alphabet was developed, which triggers resonance, forming a key to primal wisdom. In other words, the brain is registering something in the ether that is hidden, that is completely esoteric, that develops into a system, which that in itself, that last point about the sacred alphabet, is absolutely just incredible. That's how it began. And the Bock Saga is an ancient oral tradition. It's not written. The baffling thing that some of us researchers are looking at is it must have been written at some point, as you will see. We believe that the ancient scribe, I've got to get the pronunciation, is it Thoth or Thoth?
Good question.
The Egyptian. Thoth, who would you go with? Thoth, you'd go with Thoth. The ancient scribe Thoth, we believe, may have been behind the Bock Saga at some level. There's missing volumes to the Bock Saga. There's about 5 other volumes that are completely missing. The Bock Saga is, of course, an ancient oral tradition that has been passed down through generations for millions of years. It's compelling, as we will see. It compels, because it's part of an ancient birthright. And the Bock family felt that by 1984, human DNA would evolve to a stage where it would harmonise with nature, and people will be able to utilise this ancient knowledge. It is sound symbolic. Does anybody know what I mean by that? This is fascinating, of sound symbolic. If I said sound symbolic. If I said the word, this is the Bock Saga, this is how it works, which is fascinating. If I just went, ah! You'd probably not understand why I did that. That's actually, I understand that's orc for fire. So in the Tolkien language, that's orc for fire. But you got it. You understood that there was something going wrong with my voice. You understood there was something impending, perhaps. But you got it. And that is our meaning of the word sound symbolic. The Bock Saga is sound symbolic. It seems to generate meaning out of sound. And as we can see there, there's a strange... Now, I don't know whether that's a camera error, but this is the man himself, Mr. Ayer Bock. As we can see there, we've got a UFO in the top corner, or it might be camera lens, because there's quite a few of them, but I do believe possibly there's some strange stuff going on there with him. That's by Ayer Bock in 1970. The story is a sad one. And it's come through the last living member of the Bock family, a Finnish man, of course, by the name of Aser Bock. And the suppression of the saga has been sinister. In general, for those of you sat in the room who are no strangers to this, the suppression of higher thought and of higher consciousness has also been sinister, and is still sinister today in our society. We see governments doing things that, for example, the Ukraine at the moment, you can't help but thinking that some members of the government, when you watch them, especially certain members of a very, very well-known country, you can't help but wondering if they're under a form of mind control. Because there's chaos in society, and it's quite intelligently engineered. It's not just there for no reason at all. So the suppression of the saga has been sinister, and the oppression that this man met has been sinister. The oppression that I have had has been sinister in the extreme, for knowing, just knowing. And you don't even have to stand here and say, well, I'm an alien ambassador and I speak to the aliens, because in real life it doesn't frigging work like that. In real life, I suppose you'll join me in this, in real life, UFOs, alien contact, what's written on the internet, what you see on the media, it's just not the same as in real life. You're never really prepared for what they look like, for example. You're never really prepared for it. I'm not, and I think if we're all honest, maybe you weren't as well if it's happened to you. But the oppression of it has been sinister. He had two sisters. As I understand it, with Aser Bock, the relationship was incestuous with him. There was a lot of that going on. He got absolutely slated. That's the angle that they went at him from. And it was a family tradition of the Bock Saga. Every day, 2 hours long, he would listen. He would just sit and listen. And it took 20 years to learn the full story of what is termed the Bock Saga. And he had been listening for 20 years about it. It's ancient, missing history that we're dealing with. The saga is based largely on the teaching of sounds, which must be heard and experienced and passed from generation to generation. Each student is taught from the age of 7 to 27, and Aser from 1949 to 1969. The fate of Aser in all this was sinister, and it was sad what happened to him. Very sad indeed, as I will see later. We know that in the Bible code, as well of all things, known as the Torah code, there are a set of secret codes in the Torah that has, of course, predicted world events. The Bock Saga is mentioned 13 times. 13 times it's mentioned. I, as ambassador to the aliens, am mentioned only not at all. But 13 times in the saga it's mentioned, which is just incredible. So it's present, we know it's there. The foundation, it's in antiquity, at a time when this knowledge was common, and it existed a communal philosophy, a breeding system, and there was one giving system. That's very important, that giving system, God Almighty, that is so important. You wouldn't believe it, but in present day society today, that has bearing. That has definitely bearing on royalty of all things and government around us. The giving system which created the One Ring, similar to Tolkien and the Lord of the Rings. What was Tolkien perhaps indicating when he said that there was one ring which created health and well-being? What exactly was he talking about? The core beliefs of the Bock Saga present us with a very different version of history from our original origins. There are phrases and things that we have not heard before. It's an ancient language that is extinct. Secretly, approximately 105,000 people speak the language that is connected to the Bock Saga, but they keep that very quiet. Bock was discredited. Aser Bock was discredited. We think that a lot of philosophers think if the information surfaced in the public domain, it would be oppressed. It is oppressed. Our information is oppressed as experiencers. We know that they had a difficulty with the Finnish government at a place called Lemminkainen, the Lemminkainen temple. Because what happened with this ancient civilization, which we shall call the House of Aser, we'll call it the House of Aser. And what happened is that the House of Aser sprung up everywhere, all across the world, with their ancient pyramids, including the United Kingdom. And what happened is that the Finnish government called a halt to what was the equivalent of an ancient pyramid, an ancient cave, that had knowledge of the Bock Saga within it. They're the fundamental kind of core beliefs, really. Any questions so far? Are we going okay? Are we all right so far? What's the time, can I just ask?
1:30.
It's 1:30, right. In those days, of course, it was sex, sex and more sex. What is fascinating about this is they actually knew the ancient female had to be sacred. The divine feminine was sacred. In a way, the Bock Saga perhaps describes the fall of man. It perhaps describes it rather accurately, and how we as men corrupted the feminine. They were very open about this. It was a very ordered society in a time, so the Bock Saga says, called paradise time. It was called paradise time. Ayer Bock, as a young man, he gained employment at the museum. He was a very successful tour guide. He was a TV director. He was a professional dancer, and he was an actor. I think he even had a harem at some point in the proceeding. His first presentation began in about 1969 of the Bock Saga story. We've not got there's some problem with projecting the video there, but that would have been a video clip, what you see. Ayer's there. He's a fantastic dancer. That is a very rare clip taken in 1980 of himself performing for a Finnish washing powder advert. He's a fantastic dancer, and he worked for the Finnish TV company YLE. Just a little side fact. What is sad, when you take into contrast of him there being the lovely fella that he is, and you'll share my sadness when you find out what happened to him with all this. So he began to tell the saga in 1984. There was disbelief about it. People accused him of making it up. People said that he was born of an incestuous relationship of his mother, of his father, of his uncle, of his sister. It didn't matter. They just absolutely slated into him. But of course they would do if you've got the oppression of secret societies that act as a form of control that is hidden from view. You would have that go on. That would be expected. But he began to tell the story in 1984 of the Bock Saga. We've come to understand, of course, that light and sound, our origins come from that. And according to the Bock Saga, our civilization has only just re-evolved to this level of this basic understanding. Russian DNA research is heavily into all this as to how it affects DNA. What is fascinating is that our DNA works similarly to what we will see as the equivalent of the Lord of the Rings, the ring, the one ring that's there to find us. This is the mystery of the Bock Saga, the one ring. According to the saga, the history of human evolution dates to the first seeds of life, where eels grew into frogs and formed eels that gave rise to frogs, and they eventually evolved into monkeys. Some scholars of the Bock Saga would indicate that there may not be as it appears, because as Miles said at the beginning, never take anything at face value. We think, some of the scholars of the Bock Saga think that the term monkey and monkey is actually the wider universe, is what we're referring to with the Bock Saga. That's what they're thinking, because there's this famous thing whereby, is it two rams mated? Let me come into it. Just go on a bit more. Yes, I think it was something like 2 rams mated to form a human being. That is not scientifically possible, but with it being the Bock Saga, and with it being an ancient mythology, it sounds symbolic. So they're actually not sure if that's what it meant. The Quran, of course, if we go back to where everything came from water, like the Bock Saga has just said, the Quran describes that Allah made water from every living thing in verse 21:30. And Allah created every animal from water. Water is, of course, important. Even if we go back to the Lord of the Rings and Tolkien, we believe, the reason why I mentioned Tolkien is we believe he was a closet student of the Bock Saga. And water is an important symbol in the book, as it is a source of life and salvation. Deadly height, Gandalf and Aragorn, they fell from great heights and they were saved. And the Lord of the Rings appears in the work of Tolkien, although the link is tenuous but fascinating, appears to be relevant to the saga. The saga deals with an ancient sound system that was utilised and understood. It's a technology that's based on light and sound. It developed into a spiritual understanding. More than that, it triggered a whole ordered system of governments and society that was ordered, where the sacred feminine was understood. There was not crime in those days, as I understand. Now, this is the real rub about this. The real rub is probably this. They had no financial system bearing interest on nations either in those days. That's probably the real rub about it as well. There was a report a few years ago written by an organisation called the Jason Society. The Jason Society are part of the National Security Agency, so researchers say. We don't know whether that's correct. But basically one of the things they were looking at was they were assessing off-world visitation by UFOs. One of the things the Jason Society concluded was the fact of the matter was that these civilizations did not have any form of monetary system. They felt that, as the Smithsonian Institute felt, was a threat to national security. But back in the day of the Bock Saga, in a time called Paradise Time, they also had no money, they had no banking system, printing money at interest to governments either. Very interesting. The saga is a ring of power. As we said, it all focuses back to the ring of power, and the ring of power finds you. It will find you. The Bock Saga found me. The ring of power found me. It then flows out. It finds people of the most unique and unusual abilities because it's higher ordered consciousness. Higher ordered consciousness will find a way wherever it is, because it's like water, it can't be stopped. We know these were part of the house of Aser, so the Bock Saga said. There was the royal ancient house of Aser, and it is Ra that created life through language. The links to Thoth as creator of the ring of power are possible. There's a possibility, and there's a very important reason for that, which we'll come to later. It's the Bock Saga, or the ring, it's a time-honoured oral technology, and it is. It's amazing, and it's based on how oral sound works with nature and the greatest universe around us. It's a merging of genetics, it's a merging of relationships, but more importantly, the whole pinnacle of the saga was developed because of a natural disaster that an ancient civilization could see coming, and they developed a higher form of intelligence that they transmitted to the wider civilization, not using technology that we would see today. That's the fascinating thing about the Bock Saga. You might think it's some Norwegian guy waffling on about sod all. It isn't. There's something more to it than that. Something more to it than that. The saga is certainly advanced. It's very advanced. It has, and what am I talking about when I talk about the saga? I'm coming to that in a minute. I'm talking about the ring of power and the story around it. It's very advanced. It has vibrating kind of languages. Unfortunately, because there's some reason why we can't play it back, but I've got a clip. What we'll do during the dinner hour, come and see me, we'll play some clips. We've got a clip of Bock reciting the alphabet, the ancient alphabet, which has resonance with people. We've got that clip, so come and see me at dinner time, we'll play that. Now, what am I talking about when I talk about the ancient alphabet, the ring of power? The thing that maybe even Tolkien looked at as a closet Bock student, the things that academics were looking at in the 15th century. It's off the history books. We're talking about the Alfurnus Beton. It's known as the Alfurnus Beton. The real ring of power, the Alfurnus Beton, is a living historical document. There's volumes missing to it. There's about 5 to 11 volumes missing from it. And it is the original, it is indeed, it appears, the original scenario for human existence. The big question is, how did it get there? How did this alphabet get there? And the fascinating connection between the alphabet and the wider world and the Bock Saga itself. Are we okay so far with all that I've said? Right. This is what we're talking about when we talk about the true ring of power. The one ring to find them, the one ring to find them all. That was developed by a higher intelligence. Even that arrow at the top with the dot, I don't know whether you could see that. That arrow there with the dot is absolutely just incredible as to how anybody would think up something so simplistic and communicate it to the wide world. I tell you what, I'll give you a punt. What do you think that arrow with the dot is? Does anybody have any ideas what it could be? No? No?
It's not sperm going towards the Y chromosome.
Absolutely. Absolutely it is. Well done. Yes, it is. Sperm going towards the Y chromosome. It absolutely is. It's sperm going into the tree of life. Oh yes, that's exactly what it is. But what is fascinating about it is it was delivered to a population that could not read or write. That it was a world that was illiterate, and it was delivered by a higher form of people to the world at large. That's the thing that is incredible, that was delivered to people who couldn't read or write, but they somehow knew what to do when they received the instructions. Then that's the crucial point, isn't it? The arrow with the dot. Definitely so. It's a linguistic system, pronounced rot in kind of the ancient rot language. It's pronounced rot. It's known as root language, known as the alphabet. It's an ancient alphabet. It is the ring of power with 23 sounds, each of which has very specific meaning. Its ancient history is such that its resonance filters through society today and finds, like water, people. It finds the ring keepers. It finds them. It's fascinating. We can see that there are some points about the Rot and Van languages that are quite important. I'm sorry this is text heavy, but it just gets the point across. We've seen that they lived near the waterways of Finland and spoke Rot and Van languages. There is a hidden element to this. People are still speaking it today, but only about 150,000 of the world's population are doing so. It's one of the oldest of all languages, and it is still in use from pre-agricultural times. It is also known as God's gift. It is also known as Finland Swedish. It developed into the Van language. It was developed onto a population that could not read or write and did not understand language. It came from somewhere. The Rot language is basically the same as the Swedish, Norwegian and Danish root languages, which is understood all over Scandinavia. The Finland Swedish language, however, is different. It's not understood at all. But basically the Finnish Rot language moves into the Germanic languages, and there's a fascinating link with Tolkien, the Lord of the Rings, and the Rot and Van languages. Tenuous but fascinating. The oral ring, that's the ring of power. Every sound and meaning associated with it vibrates in relation to every other sound and its meaning. I know what you're thinking. What the hell is this to do with aliens and UFOs? There's a link. I know what you're thinking, and we'll be coming to that later. It's a well-known fact that whenever anything vibrates, it's a resonance with each other, and there's an exchange of energy between them, and that's what it was about. It was designed to create energy. It was a message. That there is a message to a population who could not read or write and didn't even know how to speak, from a royal family called the House of Aser. Very important. And the royal family, I'm not a fan of them, I wish them no harm. Very important to note that back then, and this is the crucial thing, what we see in society today, there is kinship. Back then, the royal House of Aser, the family of that time, during paradise time, were in kinship to the people. The government was in kinship to the people. It was the government and the royal family that looked after the people. Nowadays, that is fractured. The Bock Saga could see that coming. In society today, we are fractured. That's possibly by intentional engineering as well. It's not by coincidence that society we see today is fractured. Even the Bock Saga, before paradise time, talks of the fall of mankind and how it became corrupted. Corruption like we see today. It inspires thought processes, does this ring of power. What they knew is that the population they were aiming it at, what they knew is they needed to design something that inspired them to think via voice resonance and sound resonance. They needed something, as the lady has rightly said, that would populate the Y chromosome. That's precisely what was going on. It's all about the merging and population of the planet, and it goes into vibrational resonance with the universal life force. When Aya Bock recites the alphabet, the alphabet, it resonates. There's a pull. The word E, there's kind of like a pull. There's a particular word that he says. You've even got Aser there. But there's a particular word that he said that pulls the mind, it compels the mind, because it is the one ring. It is the real true ring of power. It is what philosophers like Tolkien have spoken about over the years. The Russians also discovered, I recommend this man's research, Garjev, that DNA operates like a human language. What is fascinating about that is that they knew, the royal House of Aser that delivered the Bock Saga, that delivered the ancient alphabet, they knew that the DNA acts like a root language. They knew they had the technology in a form that we didn't understand to influence society. And the two most important sounds in the alphabet are O, which is spoken like root, and of course E, which is spoken like reed. O means Odin. There's a lot of references to Odin. Actually, it was quite funny because at the last lecture I gave, which was at Glastonbury, unbeknown to me, they were all sat there with the proper Lord of the Rings kind of finger that they had on the finger. They all had rings on the finger, but they had no idea that I was going to give a lecture about this, and they had a dog called Odin. They had absolutely, that would just blow me away, that they had no idea we were going to give a talk about this, and they were all wearing the original one ring to find them, one ring to find them. It's a proven transmission of law. It also formed the law, it governed society. You wouldn't believe that this alphabet that was developed formed the whole story of creation and history and had a very simple message to the population of the planet. Also, because it's from a higher intelligence that is our natural birthright, it is understood currently from advanced UFO research and the advanced paranormal research that goes on that our birthright to know a higher intelligence is oppressed. It is oppressed, and as I say, the US and Russian military did research on it. They knew that it was oppressed, and deeply oppressed as well. And that's the tragedy of it all. There is a link, therefore, with all this to the UFO and alien situation. There's a link behind it all regarding this ancient saga. What is baffling researchers is it's an oral tradition, but who wrote that? Who put it together? Who understood this? Because they're speaking to a population that doesn't know how to write or read or possibly even speak. And that was the Royal House of Aser that did that. The Royal House of Aser is still there. For example, there's some crazy examples of the Bock Saga. Words that have been corrupted over the years. For example, perverse means normal in the Bock Saga. In Rot language, the perverse means normal. Hidden or heathen is another corrupted thing. And the Aser, the House of Aser, understood the 8 powers in creation. There were 4 masculine, 4 feminine, and how to manifest it into human perception. So of course perception becomes society, becomes what we see today. It's kind of like quantum, isn't it? What is esoteric, what is hidden, generates into manifested reality, and they understood that. What is fascinating, as I stress again, is they understood this upon a population that did not know how to read or write and was hit by a natural disaster, which the Bock Saga talks about. You've got a people that is illiterate, did not know how to write. You've got a royal household that understood the higher intelligence, that communicated a concept after a global disaster called Atlantis. The global disaster called Atlantis. I wonder how many of you in the room thought that Atlantis was a location. The Bock Saga says differently. I'm open to that, but the Bock Saga says differently. I personally think, if it's all right with the organisers, that, you know, we've gone nearly an hour now, and it's a lot to take in. I think you should really break off. Come back, answer any questions I've got. I'd love to speak to you if you've got any questions. Is that all right? Taking in a lot of information. I thank you for listening.
That's really interesting.
Oh, you like it, do you? Yeah.
I've been reading lots of stuff about the ancients, so it really kind of...
You understood that. I was amazed. Not many people get that it is exactly about that. Because what it means, they had a natural disaster called Atlantis, which is all the land is ice. And what they did is they developed a system that said repopulate the world, and sent it out across the world via an alphabet on a population that couldn't read or write. Just incredible. And that's the Bock Saga, but it's missing from history. You'll see it later, but you know.
I've also been reading, I've got some, have you ever come across Edmund Marriage?
No, not heard of him.
Well, his uncle wrote an incredible sort of load of stuff, and the big book that I've got is The Shining Ones, which...
Oh, right.
But he's taking stuff from all sorts of ancient knowledge. Then I've also read a lot of Zachariah Sitchin.
Yes, of course, yes. Who is very good, isn't he? I think he's very good.
I read The God of Enki recently. You know, the lost book of the God of Enki. Now he's reckoning they had a war too.
Yeah.
Amongst themselves.
Yes. Now that is actually, that would go into Indian mythology as well. The thing is with the Bock Saga, what is intriguing is it doesn't mention that, and that's a mystery. It doesn't mention about for example, that the daughters of men were fair and the people from above mated with them. It doesn't mention that in the Bock Saga, but that's because there's some volumes missing, which I think the missing volumes would probably give of the Bock Saga. And it's not even the Bock Saga, is it? The Bock Saga is the story of the Bock family, but it's the missing volumes behind what you're seeing now, which is about 5 of them that may have that information in.
Well, the Bock Saga to me is complete. You know, this is a new thing.
Yeah.
But I do all kinds of things. But also I've been studying acupuncture, And I went recently to something, and this Chinese guy, the first thing he said, we believe this knowledge was given to us by an ancient civilization.
Really?
Many thousands of years ago. We don't know when we've lost most of the knowledge. But the Chinese had one lot, and then I think it was in, their oldest book is 2005 years old. Then it came to, then I think in 1016, the Koreans came to them with some new stuff, and they shared. And we've gone on since then. But